Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello, I'm Jake Nelson and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast. Now, a few months ago, way back in the halcyon days of 2025, we had a podcast interview here on air with Captain Michelle Huntington, who was a Virgin Australia pilot, Rex pilot before that, who took us through the story of her career. And on Spotify, on that podcast, we had a comment from Selwyn Bohr, who asked, can she be the permanent replacement for Adam? It would be nice to have an actual pilot's perspective on the news. Well, Selwyn, like a work experience genie, I am here to partially make your wish come true, because while I do have a permanent co-host and replacement for Adam Thorne, that being, of course, the deputy editor of Cyber Daily and inventor of the toaster strudel, David Hollingworth, he is away on assignment in Canada at the moment. So we have brought back as a special guest host, Captain Michelle Huntington. Welcome back to the show, Michelle.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you. And I have not created any culinary masterpieces or invented anything, so sorry.
Well, there's still plenty of time.
Yes.
Michelle, how have you been?
Great. Yes, enjoying the summer heat here in Sydney.
Yeah, have you been on any interesting flights recently? We like to ask that of our guests.
I went to Hawaii earlier this year, and it was amazing, actually. The friendliest flight, and I was back in, economy way back. But so it was cool. And I spoke to the cabin crew. One of the cabin crew members was seated opposite us, and she was telling me it's because most of the staff are part-time and they have other gigs. So everyone comes to work relaxed.
Oh, that's nice.
It's like, I can feel it as a passenger.
Was it a Dreamliner or?
Yeah, Dreamliner. Yeah.
Yeah. How are Hawaiian Dreamliners?
Fine, clean. Food was airline food, but yeah, all good.
And important question, how are the guts? Did they fall out?
No.
No, that only happens when you're a pilot, doesn't it?
That's it. Yeah, not behind the curtain.
Yeah, no. Well, we've had a couple of other comments and shout outs to discuss. I'm sure you know Antoinette Daly.
Yes.
Antoinette Daly from Aviation Aerospace Australia. We mentioned her last week on the podcast. We got a lovely email from her saying, you've made it in life when 3 friends ping you to tell you that your name was dropped on the podcast. Made my day. At least you know that 3 people have listened already. That's always good to know, that at least 3 people have listened to the podcast. All the media monitoring sites have done their job. And she says, absolutely can be counted as a friend of the podcast. We are honoured to have you as a friend of the podcast, Annie. We've had a couple of other comments. This one was on YouTube. Talking about, we had a short go up about, we were talking last week about how fragile air travel is. ND6641 says, most folks don't realize just how fragile our infrastructure can be sometimes. Being a sysadmin for a while really taught me to appreciate resilience.
Ah, great. Yeah. True.
And this actually, we've had a few. We've got a few stories coming up on regional aviation, but last week we talked about Qantas Link dropping services from Melbourne to Albury and Wagga Wagga.
Yeah.
And I did want to get your perspective on this, actually, Michelle, having been a regional aircraft pilot in the past and judging by your glass as a US Senator from Arizona. At TajDuff4220 on YouTube said, on the topic of Qantas Link dropping services to Albury and Wagga Wagga, I wonder how Qantas going to all Q400 has impacted this. 50% of 72 seats equals 36. So with the Dash Q300 seating 50 people, those flights on average would have been 72% full. They say, I live in country Victoria, 4 hours from Melbourne by car, and Victoria's lack of air services is quite annoying. That does seem to be a good point, because Qantas Link has gone to an all Q400 fleet for its turboprops. And so that you'd think would bring down the load factors on some of these routes, because the reason that they were dropping these routes was these planes were only 40 to 50% full.
Yeah.
As a former regional pilot yourself, what's your take on this?
It doesn't make sense, but we don't know what's going on in the background. Yeah, there were often times back in 2003, 2004 where there were flights that were empty. So we would do I was based in Wagga. We'd fly Wagga, Albury, then to Melbourne, and it wouldn't be unusual for it to have 1 or 2 passengers or be empty because it was shared, that route was shared with QantasLink, and it didn't make sense. And quite often we were at the same time. So within 5 minutes you would race to get to the holding point first so you could beat them, out, or they did it to us. And so it doesn't seem like it makes financial sense. However, that we were just kept saying, it's not our pay scale.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on.
Because I think Rex is keeping the Wagga Wagga to Melbourne service that it has going. Was it Wagga Wagga or Albury? Rex is keeping one of those services
I think it's
alive.
ditching the Albury to Melbourne.
Yeah, well, I think, but Rex is continuing with that, and so Rex uses the Saab 340Bs, which are smaller.
Yes.
So do you think switching from like Q200s, Q300s up to Q400s would have made those routes uneconomical because Q400s are bigger planes?
I would think so, based on cost per seat. Yes, per mile. It doesn't make sense. But who knows? So I don't know. Are they scrapping the 300s completely?
Oh, the Q3, the 300s are gone. Yes, from QantasLink. It's all 400 now. I think Skytrans, more on that later, has picked up some Q300s or Q200s that are going to Lord Howe.
Yeah.
East Air, I think, up in Queensland was looking to pick up some of QantasLink's old Q300s to do their own regional services around Queensland. The QantasLink turboprop fleet is all 400s now.
It just does not make sense. But then going to one type, I suppose the financial aspect of it, and servicing country or rural Australia and making a slight loss there if they can pick up, service the industry or service those aircraft on other routes, then it keeps them going.
And the Q400s, I think, are newer as well that they're picking up. So updated planes, less chance of breaking down and so on. So
that's right.
Makes sense from some perspectives, but possibly these routes are now paying the price because the load factors on the Q400s are not as good as they would have been on the other ones.
Well, hopefully the other routes that they are being serviced and they're filling to 80% or more are, cost, like taking over the cost of those smaller routes. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because the Wagga and Albury to Sydney and Brisbane services are still doing absolutely fine, says QantasLink. So, we also had a comment from Lyle Furphy on last week's video talking about drones monitoring rest stops along the Stuart Highway in the NT and South Australia at night. So hopefully that would make the rest stops safer, you'd think. Yeah,
you'd think. And I wonder what the service time, if there is someone in danger or something happening, how do you get there? If it's so remote, like how can they send out help? I don't get that.
It could be like there's also possibly a psychological aspect to it, like if you know that someone's watching.
Someone's watching, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fake doorbell cameras and stuff provide a measure of protection as well because people are less likely to try something if they think there's a camera there.
True, yeah.
So moving on to the week's news, it has been a big week for regional aviation. And we'll start, Michelle, with your old stomping ground, Rex. There's been a couple of stories come out about Rex. AIRT, of course, the new owners of Rex, they have come over. Some representatives have met with the Australian government to look at the next phase, according to Transport Minister Catherine King. She said that AIRT has given significant undertakings to the government around regional connectivity. She said, quote, "They are absolutely determined in our discussions that we had with them to get back to classic Rex and the business of actually servicing regional Australia. We hope and we think this is a business that can make money. We think it is a business that it can grow. We hope in welcoming this company into Australia, into the passenger and regional passenger market, that we will see growth in regional aviation over time, but they've got work to do to really consolidate and make sure that the business is making money and is on a strong footing." Now, she also said that there's no time frame as yet for when AIRT would be expected to repay the government for its support, because it's been sort of propping things up financially and it's extending some financing to support this deal. She said, obviously we took on $108 million of debt and have also assisted with $60 million. They will need to repay that. We have expectations that will be repaid as Rex returns to profitability, but we are determined to support Rex for the long haul to make sure it can continue in the regions. There are undertakings AIRT has done in that process as well. Another key thing she said, They're not someone who's coming in to make a quick profit and get out. They're a long-term aviation business that loves aviation and loves regional aviation, and we're looking forward to working with them to make sure that regional aviation keeps strong in this country. And all of this, of course, is coming ahead of some inquiries by the Productivity Commission and the Senate into the state of regional aviation and regional airfares in Australia. Now, Michelle, I think when we last spoke to you, it was before Airtea bought out Rex. So as a Rex alumna, a Rex laureate, what have been your thoughts on the Airtea deal as the news has sort of come out over the past few months?
Yeah, well, T-Rex now, as it's lovingly known, affectionately known,
some of their planes are about as old as that.
That's true. Little arms. It's the rural communities need transport and they need access to capital cities and be able to get around. So that's a no-brainer. The fact that the government have loaned, that's nice. And it's kind of like the student loan where, student loans, I've paid off mine from uni, but it took a while.
Working on it.
Yeah, that's right. These are loans that could take 20, 30 years with some people or never get paid. And it kind of feels a little bit like that. If the government's happy to wear that, I wonder if the competition, though, they're not one for helping their competition with financial aid, and they want their piece of the pie as well. Historically, they have been given support as well, the competition, but I'm wondering whether they push back on this a little.
Instead of HEXDET, REXDET.
Very good.
The Rex Help Scheme.
The REXDET, yes.
On the subject of REXDET and Rex support, the government has also opened these funding applications for regional airports that are owed money by Rex. There's a pool of $5 million under the Regional and Remote Airport Support Program that is aiming to preserve regional services and minimise the impacts on residents and ratepayers, because some of these councils that own the airports are owed up to $650,000 by Rex. And so the Transport Minister said, it is fair to say that every local government airport where Rex flies in, that there are landing fees that weren't paid and other fees that weren't paid during that period of time of the administration. It's pretty much across the board of all these local council-operated airports, and the calculation of around $5 million will cover the majority of that. It will probably not cover all of it. This has, of course, been welcomed by the Airports Association, who has said it's been a long and anxious wait for regional airport operators. She said Simon Westaway, the CEO, said many of these airports are council-owned and already operate at a loss while managing aging infrastructure, rising federally mandated security and regulatory requirements, workforce shortages, and staffing pressures. Throughout Rex's administration, airports continue to provide critical infrastructure and services carrying unpaid charges to keep essential airlinks operating. You would have seen a lot of regional airports during your time at Rex.
Yeah, and if they're not maintained, it honestly, the customer pays. So it's that thing of not having security at car parks, the runways not being grooved, or so any rain comes, you can't land there. There's just general upkeep, lighting, etc. It does mean that the travelling public are reliant on good weather, the operator accepting the risk landing there. It's a loss for, it's not a great situation for the consumer. So if this can be given back to the regional airports, I'm definitely one for that. It's a business, yes, it's government, it's local government, but it ultimately affects us. So what's in it for me, basically. Yeah.
And it, as that has been suggested, it affects the ratepayers as well, because, if your local council airport is owed a couple $100,000, that somebody's got to foot the bill, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it means, I was in Albury not that long ago, and, the pay that you've got to do for the car park now, it's not as bad as Sydney Airport as far as the daily fee, but there's still fees to park at Albury. Everything costs, so, yeah, nothing's like it used to be.
And on the same sort of topic, Airports Association has allied with Regional Capitals Australia, which is this group of regional cities. They've signed a memorandum of understanding to push for more support for regional aviation and for more support for regional airports. So they want fairer airfares, stronger connectivity, more sustainable airports. Simon Westaway again says regional airports are critical national infrastructure. Many are operating under intense financial pressure. He says this MOU recognises that airports and the communities they serve are facing the same structural challenges, including high regulatory costs, ageing infrastructure, and limited access to sustainable funding. He says if we want affordable, reliable air services for regional Australia, we need to ensure airports are financially viable and appropriately supported to deliver the services communities rely on.
Yes.
Which is, what we've been saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And without making it like the feedlot sort of feeling that, say, Gold Coast has, that airport renovation that happened kind of didn't make sense to us as pilots, that they didn't have any aero bridges. It's still that get all the cattle through the passenger cattle through the food lot, the shopping centre, and then out onto these ramps that zigzag up. Everyone's still getting wet, and they spent so much money. But as far as regional goes, I think with Western Sydney International, the innovation that's happening with that, because it's always been, Asian airports, other airports have had new airports coming in. It looks amazing, the infrastructure. We now have that opportunity with Australia and specifically Sydney, that the VTOL, the pads, we've got charging for the and this is only, I haven't been out there for a couple of months now, but even the car park charging and the mat charging and things, they're really looking into the future. And hopefully, because there's that infrastructure and innovation now easily accessible and it's foremost on people's minds, a lot of that can be now introduced into regional cheaper, as a cheaper option rather than keeping instrument approaches up to date. They can spend on that rather than some of the old traditional, more expensive, archaic methods.
Now, I think that there are some regional cities that are kind of moving away from council-owned airports and towards, more privately owned airports. Toowoomba would be a classic example. What do you make of, the model of like Toowoomba Wellcamp, for example? Yeah,
well, it means that it's owned, operated. It's like those clean-up parts of the highway that you can see where a business sponsors 2 kilometres of a highway and they keep it clean. It's the pride. 2, they've got complete ownership. So they're usually kept in better condition, actually. So from my experience of flying around, just having that. And even the tiny little ones like the Southern Highlands, for example, where you still put your landing fee in the box when you land. I don't know. There's just this pride. And so there seems to be more ownership.
Is that for council-owned airports?
No, for privately owned airports. Yeah, sorry. There's so the council-owned airports. It's a service. We expect a certain level of service of the infrastructure to meet a certain level of being available, being up to date, etc. They're kind of letting us down a bit, like Parramatta Road, the holes in the road there. And whereas the privately owned feel like, and landing there, just a little bit more level of pride. They seem to be better cared for. Yeah, there's more. I don't know. It's run more like a business than the council.
Do you think that the council-owned airports have advantages over the privately owned ones?
Oh, yeah, because there's as far as governance, etc., and rules and regulations, they have to meet certain minimum requirements, whereas privately owned, they can close it at any time. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an airport that the council owns, the council's probably going to be keeping it open, right?
Correct.
No matter how much money it's losing.
Yes.
Which, may not be best for your rates, but if you need to fly somewhere, then you will be guaranteed an airport, whereas if a private operator decides to close down the airport or, goes bankrupt or anything, that's it. Right?
That's right. Or it gets into disrepair and they can't afford it. Oops. But, yeah.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break from regional aviation and a quick break to allow some ads to happen, I think.
Okay.
But we'll be right back after this. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast. We are here with our special guest host, former Virgin Australia and Rex Captain Michelle Huntington. So moving away for a little bit from regional aviation, because we've got some more regional stories to come up later in the show. But we were talking about competition and we were talking about Qantas earlier in the show. And there has been a bit of argy-bargy that has erupted over Qantas's plans to operate more services from Brisbane to Honiara in the Solomon Islands. Now, to do that, Qantas has to apply to the IASC, the International Air Services Commission, to get more capacity on the route. So they want to fly 5 times per week. They're currently flying 4 times. But Solomon Airlines has come back and, in a submission to this IASC process, basically said Qantas is trying to run us out of town. Solomon Airlines flies its own services, I think also 4 times per week on A320s. And they share this route with Qantas, and they used to code share with Qantas.
Yeah, that was
on
my
the route.
understanding, that it was a code share anyway.
Yeah, they used to code share. I think they exited that code share agreement in 2023, and Qantas started its own services, which Solomon Airlines says are almost always on basically the same day and with the same sort of timings. I think the only difference is one on the weekends, one of them flies on Saturdays and the other one flies on Sundays, but otherwise it's all the same. Now, Solomon Airlines has basically said, there is not a lot of traffic on this route as it is.
Yeah.
The route, Paul Abbott, the CEO, said the route traffic numbers are insignificant when compared to most other routes internationally. They've shown no post-COVID return to pre-COVID levels. They have declined and continue to do so. He said, given the state of the current market and its likely position in the short to medium term, the additional service would appear to be a cynical attempt to dump capacity on a struggling route in order to ultimately reduce competition by driving out the only other player in the market. So according to Solomon Airlines figures, only 39,700 passengers roughly flew on the route in 2025, and that is well down from 2019, which was more than 50,000. Paul Abbott says the market is in decline. There is little likelihood that the situation will change. Solomon Islands tourism is underdeveloped, cannot support and increase the number of visitors. There is no commercial activity of note, which will drive increased travel. And Abbott said that there is, with Qantas operating basically the same timings, there's no increase in schedule choice for travellers. Both carriers operate roughly the same day, the same timings. Qantas would suggest the addition of this 5th service would offer this choice, but given both carriers operating in a stagnant and declining market, the additional service will not grow the market, but will simply cannibalize existing services.
Yeah.
Now, you have worked for every major airline in Australia but Qantas. Do you think Qantas is trying to run Solomon Airlines out of Brisbane?
Look, it seems to be a gameplay that they use. Again, I don't know what they're behind the scenes, but it would seem like they're trying to bully them out. My thing is that with Solomon Airlines allowing or code sharing with Qantas previously, the travelling public are used to seeing Qantas on that route. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't look unusual. I'm wondering whether the locals and the government, Solomon government, would step in and just mandate that no, it has to be Solomon Islands.
Well, I think the bilateral service agreements would probably come into play here.
Yeah,
if the Solomon Islands said,
we're the only ones.
Yeah, we're the only ones. The Australian government might say, well, bugger you then, you can't fly here at all.
True.
And that is the biggest link. The biggest air link between the Solomon Islands and the outside world. And what Solomon Airlines is also saying is that it runs domestic services around the islands.
Yes.
Serves 23 ports in the Solomon Islands. But there is not enough traffic on these domestic routes to serve all of them without getting that inflow of cash from the international services to Brisbane. According to Abbott, due to the great distances needed to be flown and the small number of people who fly, domestic travellers total less than 50,000. The scale does not exist to mount a viable domestic operation. The international routes and the government subsidise the domestic operation, which then allows for the provision of much-needed connectivity. Should the international operation be forced to downsize or cease operations, the result for domestic travellers would be catastrophic. As for most ports, there are no other travel options apart from open sea travel in small craft. So what they're also saying is, if we can't fly this international service, which brings in most of the money, then we can't afford to run all the domestic services that we need to run. Coming back, I guess, earlier to the essential services that regional airlines.
Absolutely. Look, the cynic in me would be saying, well, then they're just going to put more freight on. But to make it viable, passenger self-loading freight doesn't pay the bills, whereas the actual cargo does. It does come across that Qantas is not playing nicely. And, the status quo. Mind you, growth doesn't happen by sticking as it is, but I don't know, they're removing their flights from Albury to Melbourne, and yet they're sticking on another flight to Honiara. That doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you're probably a little biased because I think Rex and QantasLink have been at each other's throats since Rex was a thing.
Yeah.
But I suppose you've had sort of that first-hand experience of, I guess Qantas muscling in on a route that Rex was operating, or that Virgin was operating and trying to.
Yeah. Look, they do, and again, my pay scale, I didn't know enough about it, but it just seemed that it didn't make sense when both airlines were bleeding, and then they up the frequency of the routes, and it's like, really, like, this is purely to bully here, to really get people going on Qantas, and the fact that even new routes that they came onto, they always try and do it within 5 minutes of the other operator that's there. So again, which doesn't make sense. Air traffic control, traffic in the town. A lot of these towns have one set of traffic lights or none, and then they all come for those flights that depart and arrive same time. We've
also had, Rex, the 737 operation, one of the reasons that people have cited for Rex's 737s going under is that Rex tried to offer cheap prices, and Qantas and Virgin, not blameless, would just come in and undercut those prices because they had a much bigger capacity and much deeper pockets.
Yeah. Some of those pockets were owned by other people, but yes.
By the way, when you were racing those QantasLink planes out there, how often did you win?
Look, it was all about who like air traffic control. They had to be on board. So it's, if you couldn't get to the holding point first, then obviously they departed first. But it was then, flat out to 200 miles so that you could get in first for air traffic control, or you'd ask for track shortening and different things. You'd try and put on a sweet voice, male or female.
And you'd challenge the QantasLink pilots that this is it, the last one there has to leave town for good, something like that.
Well, we knew each other, most of the pilots. A very small industry.
Now turning to more to domestic affairs. Airlines for Australia and New Zealand, A4ANZ, has put in a submission on the Consumer Protection Scheme the government has put forward, and typically, as one would expect, they're against it.
Yes.
So A4ANZ has said it has significant concerns about this proposed legislation. It is unworkable and prescriptive and complex. The submission says that the draft Aviation Consumer Protections Charter, as currently drafted, will make Australia a less attractive destination for new international entrants or international airlines looking to grow routes or frequency. It also represents a major practical, operational and financial challenge for airlines, in particular low-cost carriers and regional airlines, adding increased financial burden on already marginal regional routes, and increases the barrier for new entrants to enter the market. The result of this will be upward pressure on airfares, more limited consumer choice, and outcomes at odds with the government's vision for a sustainable and competitive aviation market. So under this current plan, there will be minimum standards for consumer protection, a consumer protection authority for aviation, as well as that separate independent ombud scheme. The funding would come from levies on the aviation industry. Now, Graham Samuels, the chair of A4ANZ, has basically said this would be redundant. It doubles up existing protections that we already have under consumer law. He said, quote, "What we've got is an unworkable, complex and prescriptive set of regulations with this entirely new agency to be created, effectively duplicating the role of the ACCC. The complexity of the proposed framework with a charter and an ombud undermines the productivity of the sector and the economy." The Transport Minister has come back and in a statement said, the federal government has heard from Australians about what is and is not working for them while travelling, because they've been having this consultation process. She said, "Airlines policing themselves is also not working. This is why the Albanese government is committed to delivering Australian-first aviation consumer protections that guarantees passengers minimum levels of service they are entitled to when things go wrong." She said, "It's also clear that the industry-run airline customer advocate has not delivered the outcomes passengers expect, which is why we are creating a new independent ombudsman to hear and investigate complaints." So, yes, the A4NZ has basically said, look, this is not going to work. It's going to push up airfares. It's going to lead to worse outcomes for everyone. But there is kind of a level of, well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. If cost is a big consumer thing that they look at. And so if anyone says there's going to be increased airfares, then they're going to poo-poo it because they don't want to pay any more. However, have you ever had a complaint with an airline? Have you ever had something where you've tried to get some sort of answer from an airline?
Yeah, well, there was an infamous incident a couple of years ago where I got stuck in Melbourne for 2 days longer than I was planning.
Okay.
Now, that was weather-related.
Yes.
So the airline in question, which I won't name names, but
Okay.
which regular listeners will know was Virgin. But the airline in question, basically, all they could really offer was we've rescheduled you. It's weather-related. We don't have to do anything else. And so we were left to basically find our own way in Melbourne for 2 days more than we were expecting. And we fortunately had invested in travel insurance beforehand. Travel hack, buy travel insurance.
Yes. Or pay with it with a card that has insurance included.
Yes. Yeah. So that was not a fun experience. But
I hope you at least got the $15 food voucher.
Oh, no. No, we didn't. No. We got the seat rescheduled and that was basically it.
Okay.
It's... obviously, this was outside the airline's control. It
Yes.
was weather-related, which is why they did not have to do anything but reschedule us.
Yes.
But it would have been nice as a gesture for the airline to have gone, hey, we realise you're stuck in Melbourne for 2 days. Here's something.
Yeah. I think it depends on what status you are, what velocity status you are with that airline, and potentially
What velocity status with the airline that shall not be named?
Yes. If you're platinum, then I think they put you on the very next available, whether it's full or not. So, and that's not been my experience. I'm not at that level, but I have seen
and
other
you used
people
to fly with them, probably.
Yeah, possibly. I haven't experienced that, but I have seen other people who were on my flight just get on to the next one when we were delayed for a couple of days. But there's all of the airlines have part of their customer service and their strategic planning for when things go wrong. However, like acts of God, it's like insurance, there's always these things. You're not covered for flooding if it comes from the sky. And I don't know, just things like that.
You're not covered for flooding if it involves water.
Correct. So as far as the complex consumer protection, I think if another workforce, task force has been created, someone's got to pay for it. It probably will come from increased prices, but then prices were probably going to increase anyway, so that can now be blamed on this rather than just, more profit, more cost somewhere else.
And I think this has kind of been the argument that the airlines have been using against many of the proposed sort of consumer protections. I mean, they were saying when sort of pay on delay was being kicked around, right? This idea that you should be compensated by the airline if you are unduly delayed or cancelled by, something within the airline's control, that the airline should have to cough up money as recompense to you, with the idea that, this will incentivize the airlines to lift their game.
Doctors don't do that though. If you're going to be late, you have to pay a fee, 50% or whatever. Yet if the doctor's an hour late, you don't.
Yeah. But the argument that the airlines, again, I think it was especially Qantas that was putting that forward, was that will push up airfares. It's over in the EU. It's pushed up airfares. And data that other people have cited from the EU have said not by that much, if at all. So I think it's a useful kind of scare tactic, I think, by the airlines to basically say, oh, this will push up airfares. You'll have to pay more on your tickets. Whereas, as you said, those prices might be going up anyway.
Well, and the thing is that if they're worried about international travel to Australia, it's then not palatable for visitors. That's not true. It's just going to potentially cost a little bit more. People still go to Europe, and the prices are, to get there from Australia is expensive, to get to America, etc. It's just going to be the cost of travel. So it's not going to, people want to come to Australia. It's not going to deter them.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're going to have to be watching closely to see if the government accepts that argument or if the government holds firm. The cynics among us might suggest that this might have something to do with how many Chairman's Lounge memberships are kicking around. We are going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we are back to talking about regional aviation. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast, here with special guest host Michelle Huntington, former captain from Virgin Australia and Rex. Now, we are back to a couple of other stories just to finish out the show on regional aviation. Sharp Airlines has been warning. We've been talking about government support for airlines, and I think this came up. Competitors to Rex might want a piece of the pie.
Yes.
Sharp Airlines has suspended forward bookings on its services from Melbourne to King Island beyond April. So after the end of April, start of May, you can't book with Sharp Airlines to King Island anymore. There's no final decision that's been made, says Alistair Dorwood, the CEO of Sharp Airlines, but we have been clear in flagging that a sustainable pathway forward will require some form of government support. He said, at this stage, no further flights between Melbourne and King Island will be loaded for sale beyond the end of April 2026. Now, if Sharp decided to ditch this route, realistically, the only airline that would be serving Melbourne to King Island would be Rex from Tullamarine as opposed to Essendon. But Sharp would still fly from Melbourne to Flinders Island from Essendon, as well as from the Tasmanian mainland to King Island from Burnie and Launceston. There's a little bit of irony in this, by the way, because Sharp in 2024 had said if Rex was unable to meet demand between Melbourne and King Island, they said we can double our capacity.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had said we can put on extra flights while Rex was in administration, but now that Rex is out of administration, they're looking at maybe dropping those flights. Tourism Minister Jane Howlett from Tasmania said that the government had provided funding to Sharp to maintain these King Island services during the Rex administration.
Yeah.
I think that funding has now run out, which is why they might be having to reconsider the route. Tasmanian government is looking at ways to keep the island adequately served. She said, this investment ensured service levels to the Bass Strait Islands were maintained during a period of industry uncertainty. Maintaining commercially viable air services to King Island is important, and we are looking at options. And the Mayor of King Island, Marcus Blackie, has sort of signalled we're going to be talking to Air T, see if we can get more Rex services.
Yeah.
And they want the state to continue to support the routes. What's your take here, Michelle?
Look, it's a pity when competition reduces because the consumer's the one who ends up paying, because Rex can then put the prices up.
Yeah.
So if they're the only service provider, then you have to pay. So Sharp, especially with its relationship with Tasmania and the Southern Islands, there's a lot of the pilots come from Tassie, and I don't know, there's just this thing that they were there for the Tasmanian, for the Southern Islands. So it's really sad if they do have to pull out permanently. Hopefully they can have a bit of a break, regather, and then somehow they are able to service the route again. But
Because you wouldn't expect someone like Qantas Link to move in on that, would you? Particularly if they're pulling those Albury and Wagga services. I mean, I don't know if a Q400 would be economical on that.
Again, there's not that many people that go to King Island. It would not. The fact that there were 2 service providers, that's probably the peak that what you can do. And the Metroliner, perfect aircraft for there, but and the Saab, but the 400s, maybe not.
Well, it's a perfect aircraft if you don't mind a bit maybe falling off in flight.
That's right. Oh, the smell of the fuel leaking into the cabin.
I mean, we put a lot on Rex about the Saabs, but there's not a lot of regional airlines in Australia that fly anything newer than a Saab 340 other than Qantas Link.
No, that's
right. And
right.
even the Q400s are sort of midlife at this point.
Yeah. They're shiny new in comparison to the Saab and the Metro.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of airlines might need to be putting in some phone calls to ATR in the near future or Deutsche, because they've got their new D328 coming out soon. But
right.
There's not a lot of new turboprops going around, is there?
No. I've never got to fly the Metro 3. That was like the big shiny aircraft. I was just stuck on the Metro 2s and the Merlins. But they were notorious for parts falling off them. Things breaking down.
Finally, today, one last regional aviation story. Are you familiar, Michelle, with SmartLinks Australia?
I know them as their other name. So yes, I do. Yes, I am.
Well, the good news is you can continue to know them as their other name because the airline that rebranded from Skytrans to SmartLinks Australia in July has rebranded from SmartLinks Australia to Skytrans in February.
Right.
Yes, SmartLinks Australia, we hardly knew ye. Skytrans is dead, long live Skytrans.
Yes,
So a bit of background. In July last year, Skytrans, which is now owned by Avia Solutions Group, they came in to move it into ACMI, wet leasing with these new A319s, or I say new, but new to them.
Yes.
A319s that are coming in and doing all these wet leasing services, and they've been painting their planes, their other planes white to be able to run these like white label ACMI, etc., etc.
Yep.
Now they came in, they took over, they rebranded Skytrans to SmartLinks Australia to bring it in line with other airlines that were part of the group. So like SmartLinks in Europe and Thai SmartLinks and all of these other sort of SmartLinks things. The idea we have this recognized global brand, we will use it. Well,
nobody in Australia knew that though.
Yes, and we sort of I think we sort of commented on that at the time. Well, late last year, a few months after this rebrand to SmartLinks Australia, SmartLinks Latvia, which had been spun off from Avia Solutions Group, fell over and broke both its kneecaps. And so that, I think, I don't know if that caused enough of a bad smell around the SmartLinks brand that Avia decided to wash its hands of the SmartLinks branding because we mentioned in December that SmartLinks was going to rebrand to what we did not know at the time, but we suspected that it was going to be Skytrans, and we were right. This is why you should listen to Australian Aviation sometimes. But
always.
Skytrans made sense because they already owned the IP and they had the brand recognition.
Yes.
So Qantas Michelle, the CEO of Skytrans, formerly SmartLinks, formerly Skytrans, said Skytrans Australia is a standout airline operating in the tough Australian regional aviation market, focusing on long-term sustainability. We are growing our Dash 8 fleet, adding new routes and working across industry and the public sector to help strengthen the delivery of reliable and affordable air services to rural, regional and remote communities. And on the Skytrans website, the press release title is, we are embracing our heritage name, and it's you're rebranding to what you were before. That's what you're doing.
I'm wondering how much they had to pay a marketing team to come in and go through this rebrand.
See, that's what I'm wondering. How much would it have cost Skytrans, nay SmartLinks, nay Skytrans, to rebrand to SmartLinks and then back to Skytrans?
Maybe they had the old stuff still in the shed and they could just
possibly
roll it back out.
I mean, I think they've got a slightly new logo for Skytrans and a new branding. And I've noticed, by the way, in all their press releases on their website, where in stories where it had said SmartLinks, it now says Skytrans again.
Okay.
I mean, we get the Skytrans brand back, which is great. Everybody loves Skytrans.
Yes, yes.
It just seems like this whole thing has been a waste of a lot of time and money, right?
Well, there is that saying, a way to make a small fortune in aviation is to start with a large
big
one.
Yeah. Now, I'm not talking about Skytrans's move into ACMI. That may still work for them. I'm talking about... it was a head scratcher at the time why they would throw away this well-established regional brand in Queensland to move to a brand that nobody in Australia had ever heard of, and now I don't know if the collapse of SmartLinks in Latvia gave them an excuse, or if they just decided to do it after SmartLinks collapsed because they still had the IP handy, but it's.
Look at the publicity, though. People are talking about it.
That's true.
We
People are
least.
talking about it. Skytrans became SmartLinks, became Skytrans. It's, I guess, the aviation equivalent of the Rudd government.
07, yeah.
Yeah, SmartLinks 26.
Yes, yeah. It sounds like a deodorant brand, doesn't it?
It does. I think we remarked on that, actually. Yeah. So, welcome back, Skytrans.
Yay! Imagine
and
the hangar party.
welcome back, Skytrans. Long may it rain.
Yes.
And on that note, I think that's about all the time we have for the Australian Aviation Podcast for today. Thank you to US Senator Kirsten Sinema. Sorry, thank you to former Virgin Australia Captain Michelle Huntington for her special guest appearance. We would be glad to have you back on the show if David is away on some far-flung voyage in future.
Thank you. And yes, I'll get David to eat the donuts. Yes. Thank you.
The Tim Hortons donuts?
Yeah. It's way before you. There was a book, Flowers in the Attic.
Don't know that one.
Oh, it's it's a morbid story, fictional story. I'll loan it to you.
Involving donuts.
Yes, sprinkled with arsenic.
Oh, lovely.
Just some light reading for you.
Yeah, it might make his guts fall out.
True.
But yes, that is about all the time we have for the Australian Aviation Podcast today. Thank you to Michelle Huntington for coming in. Hope you have enjoyed being David for a week.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jake.
We will be back next week for more of the Australian Aviation Podcast. And hey, check out our YouTube if it hasn't gone up already by the time this podcast goes up. But we will be sitting down with Michelle to have a look at some of the quirkier in-flight safety videos that are kicking around in the skies at the moment. But until next week, from myself and from Michelle and from David in absentia, goodbye.